G'day legends and welcome back to Chin Music. My name is Tom Gallop, coming to you from the Flowery Chair in the Fanatics Clubhouse. I am once again joined by Georges River Council's second best looking man voted in 2018, Moises Henriques. Welcome back, Moe.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me. Who pipped me that year in 2018?
I think it was Robert Arthurson, plays for Sutherland. Apparently the voting panel were big Sutherland fans, so you missed out that year.
Bobby Arthurson, eh? All right, no worries. Thanks.
Little tip is, you ever say you're the second best at something, no one ever questions it.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
Speaking of being the best at something, we are joined today by our first world record holder at Chin Music, Jackson Bird. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Really happy to be here.
Great to have you on the show, Jack.
Thanks, Mozzie.
Are you aware what your world record is for?
Yeah, most catches as a sub fielder in Test cricket, which doesn't actually go onto my Cricinfo stats. So, yeah, I don't know how to work that one.
How many did you take?
I got 4. So, yeah.
Which Test match was that?
We played against Pakistan, and I think Matt Renshaw got gastro during the game, so I came on and I was fielding in the slips there for a little bit. I got a catch at second slip off Steve O'Keefe. But I had to field 180 overs as a 12th man, which is never ideal. So.
And where was it? Was that in Pakistan?
Nah, at the SCG.
Oh, SCG,
Yep.
Okay. There you go.
Speaking of big days, happy birthday for tomorrow. Turning 38 tomorrow.
Yep, 38.
Big plans for it?
Oh, no, just try and keep my kids out of trouble, I reckon. No, we've actually got a few things on for the Sixers in the morning. Big Bash is obviously about to start. And then, probably just do some stuff with the kids in the afternoon. And it's probably they're more excited than I am about the birthday. So it's just another year older. And, it's pretty depressing, really. So,
second year back in New South Wales. How are you enjoying it? Yeah,
it's been great. Sort of got to a stage in my career at Tassie where, a change was probably something that I needed. I've loved my time in New South Wales. Get to play with a lot of guys that I've grown up playing with, like Moses. I think our team's heading in the right direction, which is always good. So,
Tom, we mentioned Jackson's age a minute ago. About to turn 38, leading the wicket takers list in Sheffield Shield this year. I remember before the season started, you're sort of carrying a little niggle, Jacko, in pre-season, and you're really dying to get out there and have a bowl before the first Shield game because you're sort of worried. I remember you mentioned, there's just that little bit of doubt as you get older. And how's it feel now, looking back over the last few Shield games? That doubt's, I assume, well and truly gone. But, in terms of the last couple of months, how have you sort of gone through the last couple of months?
I had a pretty sort of broken preseason just in terms of having a few niggles. I had a hamstring tendonitis, which sort of wouldn't go away from the back end of last year. And then got a pretty standard injury for a 37-year-old. I did my calf about a week before the first Shield game. I was pretty keen to get back out there, and I was probably a bit underdone in my first Shield game of the year in Melbourne. Just didn't have the miles in the legs. And I feel like I've gotten better every game. The sort of niggles are still there. They're still lingering around. But I think as a sort of experienced player, I'm sort of used to that sort of stuff now. So you can sort of, I suppose, manage that on the field and during a game, if it sort of stays at the same level. So, the ball's been coming out reasonably nicely.
Speaking of niggles, for those people who aren't watching on YouTube, might be on Spotify, Jackson's got one of the all-time inner thigh bruises at the moment. Did you get that in the Shield game?
No, I got it in the nets. I've had a bit of an interesting week with my batting. I've had this weird technique for about 10 years where I bat about a metre outside leg stump and then I step right across into the stumps. And Shippy, our coach at New South Wales, being the purist he is in terms of batting technique, he'd seen enough the day before the game and demanded that I changed it. So I was working on my technique in the nets and I was absolutely nowhere. I was getting peppered left, right and centre. And I was secretly hoping that I got a pair in the game so I could go back to my old technique, but I actually batted all right. So I'm not too sure how I feel about it, to be honest.
Tom, I was a part of this conversation between Greg and Jacko, and I was sort of in Jacko's corner trying to defend him, saying, he's ever since he started the prelim, he's scored a lot more runs than what he did before. And Greg's like, he hasn't scored a run for a year doing this thing. We're going to change it. It's got to stop. And then, as Jacko mentioned, he sort of was struggling in the nets there for a session and then got 13 not out. And put on a 40-run partnership with Curtis in the Shield game. And the first thing Shippy said to me when I walked into the change room was like, I told you he needed to stand still. And it was just, it was so disappointing to see Jacko actually score runs.
I mean, all Shippy said to me was like, you've just got to stand still. And I said, and then what? I just didn't know what to do after that. So great advice from the doyen of coaching. So thanks for that, Greg.
The doyen of coaching, I like that. Runs and wickets in what was a phenomenal win for New South Wales. Must have been a pretty exciting one to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the end of that game yesterday when we took that last wicket, that was just, pure emotion from all the boys. It was a long day yesterday. We fielded for 102 overs and I think we took 6 wickets in the last session. And it was just great reward for the boys after we had a pretty disappointing week against Tassie last week in a game we probably should have won in the end. So there was a lot of conversations, a lot of, honest conversations within the group. And it was just good to see the resilience in the squad to, we sort of had control of that game for the whole game. So, it would have been a really flat change room if we didn't take those wickets in the last session. We spoke about it at the start of the day that it was going to take until the last hour to get these wickets. So just to sort of stay patient and stick at it. And I think, led by the skipper, Jack Edwards, it was that's one of the greatest wins I've been a part of. And it's a great feeling at the end of the day. It's hard to replicate that. So.
It was crazy watching, seeing. I wasn't really nervous watching, and then as soon as we took the 9th wicket and Lance walked out to bat, and because the win was so close, it was probably the closest we'd been, obviously, to winning. We were only 1 wicket away, but that's when I got the most nervous, was watching, and we're like, oh, geez, we're actually a serious... And I knew we were a good chance, but I was, once you realise you've only got 1 wicket to take, and I think there was about 5 or 6 overs to go at that point, every single ball was just like, pure adrenaline watching. So, what a game to view.
Not that anyone cares what I think, but I've always thought that Curtis Patterson is one of the best blokes in Australian cricket. It was pretty cool to see him show that emotion getting that last catch, but also his 100 celebration was an emphatic celebration. You could tell that there was a lot of kind of pent-up energy coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been close a couple of times this year, a couple of 90s, got out 99 last week. I suppose to see that emotion, geez, he took off. He was running about 40 kilometres an hour after that.
Like a WWF wrestler or something. Mate, it was unbelievable.
Yeah. But no, it's just good reward for all the hard work that he's been doing. He's sort of at a bit of a crossroads, I guess, in his career at the end of last season. And, the hard work that he's put into his own game, he sort of stripped it right back, went back to club cricket, dominated that. And then he's come in and, he's probably the most informed batter in the competition now. So, the boys internally are so happy for him, which is great. So,
just a quick one, I guess, on that. Moe, I'm sure you've spent a lot of time with Curtis. You both St George boys. You would have watched him. What do you reckon it's been in the last 4 or 5 games that's really caused this change in form?
It's really hard to put your finger on just one thing. But as Jackson said there, he didn't spend much time in the New South Wales team last year. Got dropped pretty early on in the season. Went back to club cricket, and I think he was even a little relieved to get dropped. He'd sort of had a season or 2 of not really being in the runs, and I think he just wanted to get back and score a heap of runs, which he did. It took him a while to go back and actually really start dominating club cricket, but he did. He finished the season really strong last year, and then again started this season extremely strong for St George. He's always been an extremely classy batsman, and sort of always knew that it was going to come back. That form that sort of saw him score 100 on Test debut was going to come back eventually. And, I think to see the way that he's been batting the last 3 or 4 matches for New South Wales, I think he's only scored less than 50 once so far this season. Super consistent. And then to top off with a huge 100 yesterday not yesterday, but in the last Shield game, and sort of anchor the whole innings was a fantastic effort. But I think it's partly technical and also partly mental as well. Like, I think he's just so comfortable within his own skin at the moment. Very comfortable, at the crease, batting for long periods of time. So I think there's been both technical and mental changes that he's made that he should take a lot of comfort out of moving forward.
I had a huge LBW appeal against Curtis Patterson in PGs. I think it was the 2010-11 season. It got turned back. But when people ask me who the biggest bloke I've got in my pocket is, I say, well, I've kind of got Curtis, but very stiff to not get that one that day. We've talked a lot of Shield already. There was a crazy game in Tasmania that Jackson's obviously got a good insight on that we can go to a little bit later. But obviously, what a 7 days, what a turnaround it's been. The Adelaide Test, the whole thing's been completely flipped on its head. 2.5 days or barely. How did you boys see that game?
I think the overreact. There was after the result of the first test, I think there was a massive sort of overreaction around the Australian cricket team and where they're at. And I guess the 10-day break in between games probably, they needed something to talk about. But I think the Australian team just showed, how good they are really. There were performances across the board. Obviously, Heady getting a massive 100, Starkey, sort of setting the game up or setting the tone on day one with 6 for her, and then the skipper getting 5 wickets in the second innings. I think it just shows that they're a great cricket team, and they're probably one of the most heavily criticised sporting teams in Australia as well. But happy to see the boys do well, really.
Mo, we obviously had Dan Stradamus, Stan Christian on the podcast last week. He made a couple of big predictions that did come to fruition. You also had a pretty good day on the predictions last Tuesday. Talk to us about the insights. Obviously, I'm excited to get your predictions for the next test shortly, but I think you picked Pat Cummins Pfeiffer, tick. You picked a Marnus 100. He got obviously a fighting 60 that was pretty pivotal to the ultimate win. And still running in the predictions Melbourne Cup style, T Gallop called McSweeney 100, but I was pretty happy with his 30 odd as well. Any other big standout moments that you think really kind of had a big impact on the game?
I mean, obviously the way Starkey bowled day one, that wicket first ball of the match just put, I guess, he picked
that as well, didn't he?
Yes, yeah. Dan Christian picked Starkey Pfeiffer. He also picked Australia to win by an innings.
Which the people in the YouTube comments were not impressed about.
No, they were not happy with that. And it was quite a rogue call considering we'd just lost so convincingly in the first test. But he's picked it. He had a really good day when he was picking them last week, and wasn't he letting us know throughout the week? And that's probably why they call him Siri. His nickname is Siri because he does... whether it's forecasting or telling you something you don't really need to know, he does tend to think that he knows everything. And a lot of the time he is actually pretty close to spot on, old Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty impressed as he was coming through the text through the test match. It was impressive how close he was, but it just shows you blokes follow the game closely. And that is why we're providing a fan-side view of the summer of cricket. It was the shortest game by balls ever between Australia and India, which obviously begs a few questions about the future of the pink ball test, and there has been some short ones on dust bowls on the subcontinent. What do you boys reckon about the pink ball test? Jackson, you've played in 2 of them. As a player, is it something you're up for, or is it a bit of a kind of we have to do this type situation?
Oh, look, as a bowler, I certainly enjoy the pink ball test. I think Adelaide's probably the ground to do it at. I think the other grounds are around Australia. The wicket's probably not as suited. Obviously, a lot harder around Australia, and that pink ball can get pretty soft reasonably quickly. But yeah, I mean, I think it's good once a year. I think it's something different. But yeah, from a bowler's perspective, it's only a couple of hours away from starting to nip around again, just with the changing conditions. So, but I think it's a once a year type thing.
How do you enjoy sitting back on the couch and watching it, Moe?
Well, I think from a fan's perspective and a spectator, it's brilliant because I guess a lot of people can finish work, come home, and they've got almost a whole day's cricket to watch rather than coming home and only being able to catch the last session. So it's just good to be able to watch some Test cricket after dinner. I think it's great to have it on the telly at that time, which is obviously the whole marketing ploy is to, so people can watch Test cricket and get, eyes on the TV. But I also think from, just from playing, I have not played a pink ball test match, but played quite a few pink ball Sheffield Shield games. And I really sort of enjoy just the lazy mornings and just being able to sort of chill out in the morning before taking to the field. I'm not sure how lazy they would be when you're playing for Australia, and you obviously have a little bit more anxiety at that higher level. So you probably, there's part of you that probably just wants to get out onto the field straight away. But I guess I think it's brilliant to be able to see two games go the way they did, and also to see success from both bat and ball. Like Travis's 100. I know we haven't spoken about it yet, but that was, how important was that in terms of that in Australia's whole innings, and to see someone being able to, I guess, dominate what seemed to be pretty bowler-friendly conditions, but to show that, if you bat well and if you're in good form, you can still score runs out here or on this surface against this ball in these conditions. So, I think it just showed that it wasn't too unfair in one way or the other, that you can still score runs out there if you're batting well. And even as you mentioned, that initial partnership where Australia went into the night before during day one, when they went down into stumps 1 down, we saw in the first test, it was very similar where Australia had bowled India out. They had to bat for that last session. And as I said after that in the podcast after the first test, if they could have just gone into stumps sort of 2 or 3 wickets down rather than being 7 for 60, it just changes the whole dynamic of the test match. And thankfully, Marnus and McSweeney were able to just hold out. They soaked up a lot of pressure. Bumrah bowled beautifully that night as well. There was such a big partnership, and what that did in terms of softening the ball for the next day and then letting Travis do his thing, it was just such an important partnership to be able to go into that night only 1 wicket down and let the Aussie boys do all their batting the next day.
I was actually down in Adelaide, and the group I was with had breakfast at the same cafe each morning. And Marnus and McSweeney had breakfast at the same table at the same time every morning in the lead up to it. And they were very friendly. They knew a couple of the guys in our group. So it was great to see them to see them go so well. And Marnus in particular was under a lot of pressure last week. I think it's been spoken about, but probably not even spoken about enough, how important that stand on the first night actually was.
Yeah, it really was. And I had no doubts that someone of Marnus's calibre was going to bounce back. It was just a matter of when rather than if. So I'm glad he did it. And to do it, I feel like that 60 is actually worth a lot more in the context of the series, in the context of that match. So, it's great to see him. I'm sure he'll take a lot of confidence out of that innings. And then next test match at the Gabba, home conditions, he would have batted there probably more than anyone else in that cricket team. I only see him going from strength to strength.
There's been so much written about the openers this summer, and obviously there's been a bit of a change. McSweeney came in from the middle order in Shield cricket. But to see that base be set up and then Travis Head actually have the canvas to go and do what he did on the morning of day 2, that's got to kind of leave a bit of validation and actually does emphasise the importance of having strong openers so that you are laying the base for the likes of Travis Head.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in any team, I think in our I'll go back to our Shield game this week. We had an opening stand of 120, and the balls bowled for their bowlers. They have to keep coming back. It just makes it that little bit easier for the guys coming in next when they do come in. And if you've got someone like Travis Head who's coming in after a bit of a sort of platform's been set, he can just do what he does and he can really take the game on and go as hard as he wants. So,
He's had a pretty good run against India of late. He obviously got 163 in the World Test Championship final. He made 137 in the World Cup final. And then now the 140 last week in obviously a game that Australia's backs are up against the wall. And India did have a chance if things had gone their way and they'd maybe bowled a little bit better on the night of day one to put Australia in an untenable position in this series. So pretty exciting stuff. I think the one thing we haven't touched on just yet, obviously Scotty Boland came back into the team for Hazelwood. He's really never had a bad game for Australia, but once again, he was outstanding.
Yeah, I mean, I love Scotty Boland. Played a lot against Scotty over the years, and if there's anything on offer in a wicket, he can just extract movement, extra bounce. And yeah, he obviously it took him a long time to get his debut for Australia, and every time he plays, he doesn't disappoint. So it's good to see him. Obviously in the first innings, got a wicket off a no ball, I think off his first ball. But then in the second innings, took a huge wicket of Jasprit off his first ball. So you know what you're going to get from Scotty. He's always on from ball one, and I know as someone that plays against him, it's always hard work coming up against him, and he's certainly done really well against us in the past.
Is there an element of playing in a pink ball test when you're a bowler? Do you feel you're a better chance than you otherwise are with the red ball? Like, do you have a little bit of an extra kick in your stride with that pink ball in your hand, particularly under lights?
Yeah, it depends what time of day it is, really. Sometimes in the morning or in the early afternoon when the sun's out, it can be pretty flat if the ball's a little bit older. But that's what I like about it. In a red ball game, if it's flat and not doing much, you usually got a long day ahead of you. But in the pink ball games, you've only got an hour or a couple of hours away from the change of conditions, and the ball will start to nip around. So I think it's just important, I suppose, we sort of speak about in those sort of periods where it's not doing much. It's just sort of hang in there and control the scoreboard, which gives you the opportunity to be able to attack once that sort of evening period comes along.
It's interesting being there. You can see that things change for the batters, things change for the bowlers, but even in the crowd, like the atmosphere really lifts as the lights start to kick in. Obviously, Siraj got a bit swept up in the moment. Big send-off of Travis Head on 140. I'm interested to get your guys' view on being caught in the heat of the moment and things like that happening. But firstly, you guys are great mates. You've played together a lot. Jackson, have you ever sent Moe off when you've got him out?
No, I haven't. I'm not much of a send-off merchant. There's no point really. You've done enough. You've got him out. So, and I'm not great with words as well. So I'd probably wouldn't be able to be understood. So Brendan
Julian's hot tip 2 weeks ago was only sledge if you've got the IQ for it. Not saying you don't have the IQ for it, but it's obviously got to be a wordy thing to be able to bring out. Moe, have you ever sent Jackson off?
No, I've never sent Jackson off. Jackson's got me out a couple times in Sheffield Shield cricket and once in the one-dayer. But I will add, I also scored my first class 100 off Jackson, who bowled me a nice gentle ball outside off stump for me to hit through.
I'm pretty sure I actually blew Moe's pad off on about 60 that he got given out. I remember it was a Bankstown Oval.
Yeah, I do remember that. It was a very close LBW shout, but the scoreboard says 150 not out. So.
It took me long enough. Been playing for 20 years already by the time we got that.
Yeah.
Obviously the media blow these things out of proportion. How did you blokes see the send-off of Travis Head?
It is what it is. I think, I know as a bowler when you do get hit for six, especially like if I get hit for a massive six in BBL and then I get a wicket, the emotion's there and it comes out. I'm not the type of player that will send a player off, but, the emotion comes out. So I can understand it from Siraj's point of view that he was pumped up, and I think it's probably been blown out of proportion a little bit. And I'm surprised Heady got in trouble for going back at him. I think that's pretty ridiculous. But
he said well bowled, didn't he? That's what it looked like on his
lip. You could see Heady's lisp. If you were lip reading, you could see it through his helmet. It was pretty funny.
I will say, though, that was I think that was the second time already that Siraj was a little bit emotional. And I think that first time when Marnus pulled away with the beer snake and then Siraj ended up throwing the ball at him, I thought that was a bit odd. And I know he is, and I've played with Siraj before in the IPL, and he's quite an emotional character on the field. He and it's great because he's just competitive and he gets into it. But we didn't see any sort of behaviour like that in that first test when India were, really in the game or bossing the game, and then to see him starting to behave like that when India were just starting to fall behind in the test match, I think he was just starting to show a little bit of frustration there, and it just shows he really wants to crack the game open. But, it wasn't, unfortunately for him, it wasn't just a one-off. That was actually the second time in the game where he's probably, it's a little inappropriate when, a batter pulls out to then continue on and throw the ball. And I know it wasn't at Marnus, but it just shows a little bit of frustration. And then that send-off after a guy's just scored 140, there'd be a lot of bowlers in, and I'm not saying that you should be doing this or shouldn't, but there'd also be a lot of bowlers that would go, yeah, well played, mate, that was a hell of a knock. And I'm not saying you should be doing that, but considering he'd already slipped up once in the innings, that was the second time, I think it shows a little bit of frustration on his behalf. And it also shows the pressure of Test cricket, and that's exactly what you want. I don't think either of them really should have been fined. I don't think it was anything ugly to see on TV. It just showed natural human emotion, which I think for the fan and for a spectator is really good to watch. As long as, we're not swearing on air and the kids can't hear it at home, just to see that sort of emotion and what it means to these guys, I think is brilliant.
Yeah, I was going to say, being at the ground, the Adelaide Oval kind of transformed into more of an AFL crowd because the boos were so loud. And obviously you can't see their mouths when you're watching, but the big arm gesture from Siraj was almost like a red rag to a bull for the crowd. So it did add something. And I think storylines like that are probably good for the series in the long run, particularly after the dominant wins that both teams have had.
Tom, how much time did you actually spend in the crowd as opposed to out the back in the drinking tents?
In all honesty, we talked a lot about going out the back, but I was going to say before, my perspective from a fan, having not really known about the pink ball test while I've only ever watched it on TV before, as a fan, it was epic. And going on a boys trip when you're usually waking up at 9 and thinking you got to be back at the cricket by 10, if you've had a couple of sherbets the night before, then being able to kind of have a coffee, have breakfast, shake Marnus's hand in the cafe and not be at the cricket till 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it does add something. I did have a little look out the back, I will be honest, and there's something going on out there, but it's very good fun, and it makes for a great piece of entertainment being at the pink ball test for sure.
And just, when you mentioned there was something going on out the back, I'm just keen to know, did that have anything to do with the 10% influx in your Instagram followers since hosting Chin Music? I know I think you had about 730 followers when we started hosting Chin Music together. You're up to about 770 now. I know it's not quite 10%, but we'll round up for the sake of this argument. Did you get any extra love on the back of those 40 followers out the back of Adelaide Oval?
It was unreal to have the middle-aged men of Adelaide come up and shake my hand out the back, no doubt, Mo.
And what is your Instagram handle, Tom? Because I want to make sure that these followers keep moving up in the same direction. We want 850 by next week. We were
going to ask for some fan engagement in the form of DMs later. You can find me, Tom Gallop __.
That's not it, is it?
That is it.
Oh, okay.
Look it up. Hugo, put it on the screen.
I don't know. I don't follow you. Kidding.
I waved at Mo at the Shield game yesterday and he put his head down. It was pretty demoralising given this is our 4th podcast episode. Going back to India quickly, you did mention that you've played with a few of their guys, so I'm sure you've got a bit of a perspective on how they'll deal with this loss. What it'll be like in the Indian camp right now? How do you think they'll respond? And do you think they would have gone into panic mode after that loss on day 3?
I don't think they'll be in panic mode. I think, if anything, they'll take a lot of confidence out of how they played in the first match, and know that, well, if Australia were able to turn it around like they did, that means we can. And sort of they turned it around really quickly after their home series loss against New Zealand as well. So they'll know that, in cricket, a lot of the time, especially Test match cricket against two fantastic teams like we're seeing at the moment, there just seem to be these critical moments in matches. And as I mentioned earlier, that partnership between McSweeney and Marnus on night one was the difference in this second test match. And they probably know if they were able to get rid of one of them that afternoon or that evening, then things could have been very different. And they just need to be a bit, I'm assuming they'll just talk about needing to be a bit sharper and, taking that opportunity if it comes up in Brisbane. But I will say, from a viewer watching and from obviously someone who's played a lot of cricket, the only concern I have about the Indian cricket team at the moment is how much their bowling attack is relying on Bumrah. I think you look at the Australian bowling attack, and even, Hazelwood was our best bowler in the first test. And then in the first innings of the second test, Stark's our best bowler. In the second innings, Cummins comes in and takes fifer. In both innings, Scott Boland contributes with these huge wickets. And we're already seeing 4 seam bowlers put there, in the Australian test team, that they're sharing the loads of the wickets, they're sharing the loads of the bowling, where I know Siraj is a really good supporting act, but Bumrah's taking, the majority of the big wickets for India at the moment, with a bit of support from Siraj, but I think there'd be some big concerns if I was an Indian fan, if Bumrah does get injured.
When he went down with cramp, that was really concerning. Like, I think all fans, Aussie or Indian, were looking at that going, this series looks a whole lot different if Bumrah's out of it.
Completely agree. And I think from a fan's point of view, Bumrah has to be playing. And don't get me wrong, India has some great depth in their fast bowling, but they don't really have anyone. And there aren't any teams in the world that can just come in and replace a Jasprit Bumrah, to be fair.
Is he the best bowler in the world at the moment?
Oh, 100%. He's so good to watch. It's just something... his wrist is just, he gets so much movement sideways, and, he's got a funny release point, he's got a funny action, but, he's unbelievable. It's great to watch as well.
With the last wicket that he took this test match, I think his bowling average dropped below 20, which is pretty phenomenal through 40-odd test matches, 42 test matches.
Yeah, and bowling, his home tests are in India, which are a fast bowler's graveyard. So to be averaging 20, where he plays half his tests at home on wickets that don't seam, and really hard to get any sort of sideways movement, slow wickets. It's phenomenal. Like, I remember Zahir Khan, probably one of India's greatest of all-time fast bowlers, averaged 30 with the ball, and that was superb. And that's because, obviously it is so hard for seam bowlers to bowl in India and to be effective there, but he's obviously found a way to be effective not only at home but away. And I think, averaging 20 in Test cricket when your home grounds subcontinental wickets, I just think he's absolutely phenomenal. It's a bit of a freak of nature, if anything. And we've just seen his dominance over, all of the Australian batsmen so far in this series. But the concern, if I was an Indian fan, would be if he's not fit or if he doesn't play, who are going to take those wickets, and who's going to step in or step up and even support him in, if he does go a few spells without being able to crack open the Australian batting order.
There's been a bit of talk about Mohammad Shami potentially being ready to come back into the team for Brisbane. Are you putting him straight back in based on those comments around the reliance they've currently got on Bumrah?
Yeah, I certainly would. He's got a proven record in Test cricket, but more importantly, he's got a proven record in Australia as well. I think the last couple of series he's bowled really well.
He's not too dissimilar from you, actually, Jackson. Shami, wily, swings the ball both ways.
He probably bowls about 25 k's quicker than I do, but if I was a selector for India, I would bring him straight in just to take that load off Jasprit Bumrah. That's what Moises was talking about before. It'd be interesting to see where that goes and what they end up going with.
I did see some footage of Shami a few weeks ago. I think it was his first bowl back in a match. Since this injury that's kept him out of Test cricket for quite some time now. He definitely didn't look at his best, but I agree with Jackson there. I think he'll rise to the occasion. He's played a lot of Test cricket before. he'll be, bolstered by the conditions up there, which again there'll be a bit more pace and carry at the Gabba, and he does have such a beautiful seam presentation, which is very suitable to the conditions up in Brisbane as well. The only question will be how much work will he be able to get through with such little match preparation, but. That's a risk I'm sure the Indian selectors, with his experience as well, I think they'll be willing to take.
We've kind of moved on to Brisbane here, but I think that's fair enough. The Indians obviously chopped and changed their batting order a little bit for Adelaide. The skipper came in at number 6. They stuck with the same opening pair. Very different result in the game. What do you think they do with their batting order in the next test?
I'd keep it pretty similar, to be honest. I think... I'd be concerned trying to move Rohit up any higher if, typically 6 in Test cricket is probably, is the ball's going to be doing less than when you're opening the batting. If Rohit scored 100 at 6 and, the openers missed out, then maybe, but, he didn't score any runs in the game. So I'd be just letting him stay down there. I would say it's typically an easier place to bat than opening the batting, and probably will be for sure at the Gabba, unless he's exposed to the second new ball. But even then, the bowlers will be, they'll have 15 and 20 overs into them by then. So it will be a little bit easier again to bat than opening the batting. So I think you let the skipper sort of stay down at 6, considering that the openers had success in that first Test match.
Speaking of Brisbane, you kind of mentioned the conditions just then. What kind of conditions would you guys be expecting? Because obviously, I think almost the fastest Test match ever in Australia took place in Brisbane. Equally, when Peter Siddle's got a hat-trick on his birthday, ended up being one of the most famous draws of all time for an Australian Test. So, having played a bit of Shield cricket there in the last few years, what kind of wicket would you guys be expecting up there?
I think Brisbane... it can be a beautiful place to bowl when the conditions suit. I think the overhead conditions can play a part. But on the flip side, when there's not much happening, it can be a beautiful place to bat as well, because you can trust the bounce of the wicket. You can leave on length. It's probably my favourite place to bowl in Australia, but that's in Shield cricket. So the wickets are probably a bit more conducive to fast bowling in Shield cricket than they will be in this Test. But I predict it's going to be a pretty good cricket wicket. It's a funny sort of wicket, though. I think, there can be a fair bit of grass on day one. It can be quite slow. So it nips around a little bit, but it's like quite slow nip. So it's harder to sort of get the catches behind the wicket. So sometimes, batting first on day one can actually be better, because you sort of, those nicks they nip sort of too far and they don't quite take the edge. And then, on day 2, once it quickens up a little bit, you get your chance to bowl, and that's when you sort of get those nicks to occur, because it's obviously not nipping as much. So it'll be interesting to see what the wicket's like.
Australia famously got sent in 2002 by England. I think they made nearly 450 in the day or something like that. So it does seem to be a wicket where, yes, it can be bowler friendly, but as you said, there's days where you can absolutely fill your boots. I was going to ask you guys about the quick turnaround from Adelaide to Brisbane. For the players, this is a weird question, but do the practice facilities match what is out there in the middle? So will the players find it weird going from Adelaide to Brisbane, and do the practice facilities make it easier to make that transition because they mimic what is going to be out there in the middle?
Well, that changes at every ground in terms of typically they do try to prepare the practice wickets to behave like the centre wickets, but rarely can you get it exactly spot on. But they do try to prepare them somewhat alike. Adelaide's probably the closest in the country in terms of being able to replicate the centre wicket. Gabba's not too bad, but you can't. It's very hard because they put a lot of preparation into one wicket in the middle of the ground. There's just not enough people to make sure that you can prepare 4 wickets out the back exactly the same as that one in the middle. But, the soil will be similar. It'll have similar amount of bounce and all those types of characteristics. They probably just, I'd imagine, wouldn't be able to cope with the load that the centre wicket would be able to cope with, in terms of that they'll probably tire a lot quicker out the back in the practice nets than the ones out in the middle. But I also just wanted to get Jackson's opinion on the question you asked me before about Rohit, Tom, and from an opening bowler who's opened the bowling for a long time, interested to hear his point of view of who he would prefer to bowl to out of the opening batters. Obviously Rohit, a fantastic Test cricket opener for a long time, hasn't scored some runs for a little while, but very experienced, very accomplished. If you're opening the bowling, would you prefer to bowl to KL Rahul, who probably looks a little bit more in form, or would you prefer to bowl to Rohit at the top of the order there?
Oh, look, it's a hard one. Rohit's obviously a champion player, and he's been around for a long time. But I think KL, apart from obviously Jaiswal, I think KL Rahul's probably looked the best out of the Indian batters at the top of the order, and I feel like a big score's not too far away for him. I think he's sort of, bats time and bats balls, and he's got all the shots, as we've seen, in white ball cricket. And look, I think, Rohit's probably not at his best at the moment. As a bowler, I'd probably prefer to bowl to him. I think just watching him bat last week, looks like he can sort of beat him on both sides of the bat at the moment. Obviously Scotty got him LB, and then Paddy bowled him a absolute seed to get him out in the second innings, bowled on the outside edge. So I think as a bowler, they're sort of the batters you do want to, you do prefer bowling to. Just getting beaten on both sides of the bat is something that you look for. But no doubt he'll go up to Brisbane and work on a few things like some of our batters did in between tests, and he's shown over a long period of time that he's a great player.
Mo, if you'd ask me, I'd probably prefer to bowl to... I think I'm bowling a Rohit at the moment. I think he just looked a little bit more out of sorts. And as Jackson said, I think KL Rahul almost looks like their form player away from Jaiswal.
Yeah, nice. Would you be concerned, though, just to follow that up, would you be concerned that you'd bowl Rohit back into form?
I'd be lucky to get the ball down to Rohit at this point, I reckon.
Yeah, I'd be so concerned. And that's for me bowling. I'd be the guy that, he'd sort of take for 15 off and over, and then all of a sudden he's back in nick. And I'd imagine if he's taking me for 15, he's probably taking you for 30.
Quick transition to you. Are you fit to bowl next week? Big Bash kicks off next Monday. Are you ready to go and raring for the Sixers?
I'm ready to go. I was fit to bowl. St George District Cricket Club had we had first grade against Western Suburbs at Hurstville Oval on Saturday. Unfortunately, it was rained out, but I was fit to bowl in that game.
Did I see some footage of you doing covers?
Yeah, I was doing the covers. Yeah,
the grade cricketer would love that.
Yeah, no, loved it. It was good to be back with the boys. Actually, now that we mention it, when I was back in the change rooms, the boys were asking me about the guy we spoke about on the last podcast that you gave the Mohammed Siraj to. You gave him a big send-off after you took a catch. And I think we had some feedback throughout the week on one of our channels as well. So do you want to shed some light on...
I think Nathan Price came through in the YouTube comments with a very pointed question. I'm not going to flat out confirm or deny, but wink twice if it was that bloke. And we'll go with that. But yeah, great to see some engagement in the YouTube comments. Keep coming through. Good stuff, bad stuff. We love it all. Before we leave the Brisbane Test, we're going to do predictions, but just on the Aussie team, Hazelwood sounds like he'll probably be fit. Boland, outstanding in Adelaide, but does Hazelwood come straight back in? Yeah,
I think so. I'm probably one of the biggest Josh Hazelwood fans on the planet. So if I was a selector... if he's fit to go, he comes straight back in. He's, one of the best bowlers in the world. He's our best bowler in Perth as well. So it's obviously unlucky for Scotty because Scotty does a great job every time he comes in. But that's the nature of the game. Sometimes you can't pick everyone in your team. So it's a good problem to have for the Australian cricket team.
Yeah, I agree, and I think from a very selfish and biased point of view, really need Josh to be fit for that Test match because that means that Scott Boland will be the reserve bowler and Sean Abbott will be available to play the first Big Bash game for the mighty Sydney Sixers. So, while that's bad news for Sean, that is, less likely to make a test debut, but it's a great win for the Sixers and obviously the Australian cricket team. If Josh Hazlewood can get fit, what a bowler.
And quickly on the batsmen, obviously McSweeney was superb on the night of night one, and Marnus' 60's been spoken about a fair bit. But I saw yesterday that all of the batsmen except Carey, Head and Green, who's obviously injured at the moment, are averaging under 30 in 2024. Should the batsmen fail again, win or loss, will there be changes in the fourth game?
I personally don't think so. You look at that top order in Australia, and they might not have, they might be averaging under 30 this year, but there's only been 3 or 4 test matches this year, so
it's amazing how those stats can get.
He's a great manipulator of stats, Tom.
Yeah, and look, I think Smithy's close. So he's been around training a lot with the Blues in the last sort of couple of months and in the build up to the Test summer, and I know personally from bowling to him in the nets, he looks like he's in good touch. So I'm pretty comfortable with having those sort of guys in the team.
I was with the great Daniel Roots down in Adelaide, friend of you blokes, friend of the show. He was pretty much in tears after Smithy got strangled down the leg side because he was expecting 100 and a big day, and obviously a big hug after the game.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's never a nice way to get out as a batsman getting burgled down the leg side, unfortunately. But and only obviously having the one innings to bat in this game and not being able to rectify that in the second, I'm sure he would have been hungry to score some runs there. But what can you do? You push on and you prepare for the next matchup in Brisbane, and I'm sure he's going to be, as he always does, hitting as many balls as anyone does in those nets.
Predictions. This is my favourite part of the show. Predictions. Brisbane Test. I'd like someone to get 5 for, any player. Someone to get 100. A big storyline. And then a series prediction from now on. Obviously, only 3 games to go. Sits at 1-1. But where do we think the series goes from here overall as well? Jackson, I'll start with you. Who's taking 5 for this weekend or week?
I think Josh Hazlewood, if fit. So that's, it's a hard one if he's not fit. So,
I'm going to go Siraj to step up, a little bit of emotion flying. I've asked for the bowlers around Bumrah, and I think so far he's been the best supporting actor. I'm going to pick him to play a starring role in a losing team.
What about who's scoring 100 this week?
Oh, Smithy. I hope Smithy scores 100. He's got good form at the Gabba. He loves batting up there, so come on, Smithy.
Yeah, I need Smithy to start scoring a lot of runs to be, I think I tipped him for the leading run scorer of the summer and to dominate. So I need him to start scoring some runs, but it's, I'm not gonna go past Marnus up in Brisbane in home conditions. I think we'll see him lead the ball really well early, and then I think as conditions get a bit better for batting, he'll start to come into his own then.
I questioned his inclusion last week due to his his Test record to date. But being at the ground and seeing Shubman Gill bat, I thought he was the pick of the Indian batsman, and I think he'll make 100 in Brisbane as well. So there's my big prediction. What about a big storyline? What's the storyline that we're reading in the paper next Tuesday?
I don't know. Maybe India complain when Siraj just gets booed by every person at the Gabba after last week. I think Hetty said it, if you razz the crowd up, you get the crowd. So I think that's what's going to certainly happen when he comes on to bowl.
What do you reckon, Moe?
I think next Test match, if I've picked Siraj to take 5, so I imagine he's going to at least send 2 send-offs in those 5. So I reckon it's 50% of his match fee next game.
I saw some interesting stats that 3-day or less Test matches are up 10% in the last 5 years. So my big storyline is Australia win in the last session of day 5. I think 2 floggings. It's a game that then goes to the 5th day, really tight battle. Take it to 2-1. to the fourth test. I think that'd be pretty awesome. So that's my big storyline.
And what about runs and wickets, Tom? Who are you picking?
Well, I told you I've got Shubman Gill. And for the wickets, I think it's going to be flat. I think the broadcasters and Cricket Australia are going to want a longer game. I reckon it'll be five days, and I think that means the GOAT's going to come into play. I think Gaz, after not bowling much in Adelaide, is going to pounce back, and I think he'll take 5 for. Yeah,
I like that call as well. He gets a lot of bounce up at Brisbane, so I wouldn't be surprised if that comes to fruition, Tom.
Fair bit going on else around the cricket world. Obviously, the Aussie women are taking on the Indian women as well. Australia are up 2-0. They had a resounding win in the last game. Elise Perry back at doing what she does best.
Yeah, what about that 100 in the second ODI there? That was, typically she's probably doesn't tend to bat that aggressively, but we mentioned last week on the show that she's definitely added a few strings to the bow, and a really good platform set by the opening batters there allowed her to bat with a lot more freedom, and she just came at 100. I think it was 76 balls or 75 balls, which was
very good,
which was just phenomenal. So well done again. But
6 bombs.
Yeah, there you go, 6 sixes. But I did want to talk about Georgia Vole, who I think it was her first game in the first ODI for Australia, making her debut, scoring some really important runs there. And then again, 100 in the second game. A really strong WBBL as well. We didn't mention her last week on the show, but struck at 147 in the WBBL, averaging just a tick over 30, which are phenomenal numbers. And to see a girl striking at such a high strike rate in the WBBL, I think is fantastic for the sport. And then to see her come in and do so well for Australia, and both her knocks so far have been, rapid fire as well. I think as well a junior rugby league player, played for Queensland under 18. So we're starting to see the girls, poach some of the best athletes in Australia, which is good. I think some really strong signs there for the Australian women's cricket team.
Elise Perry, obviously also a dual sport legend. I read an interesting story during the week about arguably the greatest dual sporting story ever. Chris Balderstone in the UK. He played for Leicester in cricket and the Doncaster Rovers. And on the 15th of September in 1975, he was 51 not out overnight. He then got in his car, drove 30 miles to play for the Doncaster Rovers. They had a 1-1 draw. He drove back. He made 100 the next day, took 3 wickets, and Leicester wrapped up their first ever county championship. So you never know. Georgia Vole might play the NRLW next year as well.
That's extraordinary that you're able to do that.
That's just what I do, Moe. Don't mind me.
I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about the bloke who... God, Tom. All you did was speak on a microphone, mate. I was talking about the guy who played 2 games of professional sport in 2 days. Here he is. He thinks chatting on a microphone on a pink flowery chair is phenomenal.
I love the pink flowery chair. The other big story in world cricket, obviously, New Zealand got thumped again by England. England looked pretty ominous going into the Ashes next year. Did you boys follow that one?
Yeah, I did see a bit of it. They've been flogged both test matches at home. It's probably a bit of a come down from there. They beat India at home, India away from home, 3-0. Which was extraordinary, and then to come home and get absolutely flogged like they have, it's been interesting to watch. But I think England, once they, I suppose, get on top of you a little bit, the way that they're playing their cricket now, they're pretty hard to. The games get away from you pretty quickly. They score quickly with the bat, and they've got a good bunch of fast bowlers now. That Bryden Caster's come in and done really well for them. Bowls with good pace, and that sort of plays that enforcer role for them. So it'll be good to see how he sort of goes coming out here, obviously, for the Ashes next year. So, that's going to be a hell of a series next year.
I just wanted to speak to Bethel, obviously making his test debut a couple of tests ago, and then coming in scoring 90-odd in the second test as well. There was a lot written about England taking a huge punt with him, hadn't scored a first-class 100 yet. And I think typically, a lot of that criticism would be pretty fair because there'd probably be a lot of batters in county cricket who have scored so many runs, who probably been knocking the door down or feel they're a bit hard done by because this kid's come in without 100 or without a great deal of sort of performances and just grab that spot in the English Test cricket team. But I just wanted to point out the culture of that team at the moment and the England team. And if you are going to give a young kid a go who they obviously see as someone who's going to dominate in the future and play a lot for England, and from all reports, he's got a huge amount of talent and a fantastic cricketer. I just want to, there's been a lot of criticism, but from an outsider looking in, if you're to make a Test debut as a young player, geez, you'd love to do it under Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum, under that leadership where, there's a lot of freedom. It's a really liberating, environment to be a part of. You wouldn't be second guessing, should I play this shot? Should I not? Am I doing the right thing? Am I not? There's just, it seems like if you are a young player and you're not scarred, it just seems like such a good environment or such a great environment for a young player, a young talented player to come in, and just along the way, I'm sure they'll, trim the edges of performances and skills and techniques. But it just seems like, with those two guys in charge, that if you are going to pick someone young and you're sort of not known, that's the environment that they will have success in. Having played against both of them and sort of met them both around in world cricket a little bit as well. I just feel like they've got such a big strength there, that team, in being able to allow someone like Bethel to come in without much experience and almost giving him the confidence to go out there and do so well.
Speaking of playing groups that are going to be fostering confidence, two of the Sydney Sixers sitting on the brown couch. The next time we record, the Big Bash obviously will have started. How are you boys feeling about the Sixers season coming up?
Yeah, I'm excited. Probably more excited that I don't have to play any more Shield for a couple more months because the old rig's a bit sore. But look, Big Bash is a great time of year. We've got a great group at the Sixers. We've been together for a long time now. We've all played a lot of cricket together. And historically, we're probably due to win another tournament. So, hopefully I get a game and Moises picks me.
The skipper's been sitting on ice as well, so he's fired up and ready to go.
Well, I'm just a little bit concerned because I hear Jackson's on ice as well. He's a bit sore after yesterday, so I was keen to get his fitness levels here as a Chin Music exclusive to see how we're going, in a week's time from today, Jack.
Yeah, I should be right, mate.
Is day two harder than day one? Will you be sorer tomorrow than you are today?
Yeah, I go off my anti-inflammatories for a few days and my body just completely shuts down. So
I'm the same on the bench press, mate. Yeah. Don't worry.
So I should be right, but I usually play the first couple games and then they drop me for the finals, but that's all right.
And
how about you, Mo? Are you ready to go? You're fit now? You're going to be bowling and batting next week?
Yeah, ready to go. Physically, no problems there unless something happens, obviously, between now and next week. But obviously, I haven't played any cricket for a few weeks. So, we've got a couple of practice games coming up this week, which will hopefully I get some time out in the middle and get the skills up to scratch.
How are you hitting them at the moment?
Great in the nets, but, everyone does. So,
have you bowled to him, Jackson?
No, I haven't. Not for a couple of weeks.
No, the boys have been preparing for Shield games, and because I haven't been playing, they're not going to waste any precious deliveries in between practice games to a player that's not actually preparing for Shield cricket.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't really bowl much in between games. I can hardly move, so I try and keep that to a minimum. Just bowl them in the middle.
Massive couple of weeks of Big Bash coming up, and we are going to dive into the Big Bash next week. Jackson, we've got you. We've got 5 more minutes. We're just going to quickly chat about your career. We should have left more for this, but obviously been a massive couple of weeks of cricket. You moved down to Tassie, what was that, about 12 years ago?
Yeah, it's probably, I think it was 2011, so it's about, 13, 14 years ago.
Am I right in saying that coincided roughly with the lockout laws kind of shutting down King's Cross? I asked an unknown source to the show about Jackson, and he said, he ducked down to Tassie when he couldn't go out in the cross on a Sunday night anymore.
Yeah, I mean, once the lockout laws came in, the cross was dead. So Sydney was dead to me. Look, I've worked in hospitality for a long time, so we used to enjoy going up to the cross after work. So, yeah.
I will say, Tom, on the back of that, Tom, obviously Jackson enjoyed, a little bit of a party time in his early 20s, which we all did, but now he's the ultimate professional. You see him after a game with a Heineken Zero while all the other boys are, celebrating. The last few years, as he's gotten older, he's obviously realised he has to, look after his body a lot more, which is, I guess, pays credit to the fact that he's about to turn 38 and he's still one of the leading bowlers in Shield cricket.
I think I called you in our first ever episode the form bowler of the Shield, and now at the break point you are leading the wicket, so thanks for validating that call. Are we expecting to see more Jackson Bird in the next few summers?
Well, definitely for the end of this summer, but yeah, I'm not really sure. Like, I'm really enjoying my cricket. I still enjoy the grind of training and trying to get go to training and still improve. I still feel like I can improve. And, I was saying to one of the boys yesterday, we've got a really young group at the moment, and I really, really love playing with the young guys. They bring that energy to the game. They bring that energy around training, have a great laugh as well. So that's sort of something that, sort of keeps us older blokes going, and seeing them then go on and start doing well in Shield cricket is certainly, it's a lot more rewarding for the older guys to see that, because you obviously help these young guys along the way. But look, I haven't made any decisions yet. I sort of didn't want to put an end date on my career just because I didn't want to have that in the back of my mind and then potentially start taking shortcuts and, not doing the stuff that I need to do to get ready to play. So, I'm still just sort of taking it game by game and loving my cricket at the moment. So,
and 2 wickets ago, you passed 500 first-class wickets. That's a pretty special milestone.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably just shows me how old I am. I've been around a while.
Who was wicket number one?
Dan Harris from South Australia, I got a chop on. So, that was a long time ago, 2011, I think. So,
and I think Jackson this year's moved to number 5 on the Sheffield Shield wicket takers list of all time, and possibly by the end of the season could move up to number 4, which is phenomenal. 398 Sheffield Shield wickets for both Tasmania, well, the majority for Tasmania, but probably the last 50 or 60 now for New South Wales, at just 22 apiece, which is extraordinary. But what do you reckon you can get it to, Jacko?
I'm not too sure. I get reminded a lot in the socials comments that it just means that I didn't play a lot of Test cricket. So thanks to all the people out there that remind me of that. Look, I don't really care, to be honest. I play the game not for wicket milestones and stuff. I'm sort of still around because I do want to win a Sheffield Shield. It's something that I haven't done. Come close. Really close a couple of times, and that's more important than individual wickets. And I know it's every sportsman says that, but it's definitely the case. So I think once I sort of stopped playing for Australia, my goalposts of what I wanted to achieve sort of changed and moved. And it's about trying to win, and I suppose just being a good teammate and helping these younger guys sort of, I suppose, navigate that early stage of their career. So that's certainly something that's keeping me.
And you could really see that yesterday when Jackson was in at second slip. Tanvir started bowling around the wicket. WA was sort of 3 down and looking pretty certain. Hilton Cartwright was out there batting, and he came around the wicket, big cover drive from Hilton, and Jacko took a real sharp catch in at second slip. And I feel like you celebrated harder for that than you did for any of the wickets you took in that match.
I was just happy that it didn't. It was, if I hadn't got my hands up, it would have hit me square in the nose. So, it was pretty funny because we were sort of debating whether they wanted me to field there, because I've made it pretty clear that I absolutely hate fielding in the slips off the spinners, because I had a horror day at the SCG in a Shield game about 7 or 8 years ago. I think I dropped about 3 or 4 catches. So, it was just nice to hold on to it. It sort of happened real quick, so I think it was a bit of a fluke.
Do you think yourself and James Anderson are the best ever fast bowling slippers?
I'm not sure. I feel like I'm 50-50 at the moment. Every time I catch one, I think to myself, I'm like, how did I catch that? I wasn't paying attention, or I'm cooked in between spells. And I just enjoyed fielding in the slips because I don't have to go fine leg to fine leg, and it saves me a few extra kilometres.
Oh, you're being friendly. Charlie Wakeham said, make sure you mention his mitts. He's got the softest, safest mitts in Shield cricket.
Thanks, Chucky.
Oh, touching which balls? Jesus, Chucky. I wanted to ask you about the New South Wales Sheffield Shield captain at the moment and one-day captain Jack Edwards. I know he's looked to you for a lot of bowling support over the last couple of years, and wanted to get you to give some insight over maybe some of the things you've spoken about, because again, like 10 wickets in the Shield game recently. What are some of the little pearls of wisdom you've been able to pass on to Jack that's obviously working really well for him?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to see Jack going as well as he has, because he works so bloody hard on his bowling. His development over the last couple of years has been unbelievable. He's sort of, got a bowl every here and there, and now he's one of the best bowlers in the competition. And I think he was a bit, he obviously had a really good year with the ball last year, and the first couple of games of this year he was a bit frustrated just in terms of not getting the wickets he would have liked, but he felt like he was bowling well. And I had a couple chats to him just around not trying to change anything and do anything different, just if you put the ball in the right area enough, you're going to get your rewards. And that was sort of mid innings in Adelaide, and he got 4 for in the second innings in Adelaide. Bowled well last week against Tassie again, and then he got his rewards today. But he's got all the tools to take it to the next level. He's tall, he hits the bat hard, he gets really good bounce and can move the ball as well now. And I sort of think he's just learning more about his game every day. And he's got a good tank as well, because he bowled 25 or 26 overs yesterday, and still managed to produce for us when we really needed it to at the end of the day, which is, that's great for a fast bowler to have that. So, and he's a Manly boy as well, so shout out to the Manly Cricket Club. So yeah, I'm wrapped for him to see, how well he's going at the moment, because he deserves it, because he puts the work in. So,
unbelievable win yesterday, and us at Chin Music, we've seen our guests go on to big things in the weeks that have followed. So I'm feeling good about you having your first Shield win this year. Thanks a lot. Sorry, so he said he hasn't won the Shield before.
I haven't won the Shield.
Oh, no. The Shield competition.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you meant Shield winner of the game.
I was saying, what did I say?
One more game this year, but
Jackson, it's been unreal having you on, mate. Much appreciated. You're a champion of the game. Moe, thanks as always, mate. How do you think we went this week, round 4?
Yeah, I think it was probably our best week to date. Yeah, it felt good.
I felt stumbly today.
Did you? We'll listen back and see if we need to record a new one.
Looking at that big bruise on Jackson's thigh just made me nervous the whole time, remembering what that feels like. But thanks a lot for tuning in to another episode of Chin Music. It's been great fun. You can find us at Fanatics TV on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Once again, thanks very much. Catch you next week. Cheers.
Well, there it was, ladies and gentlemen. Yet another episode of Chin Music. If you enjoyed it as much as we did, please hit the like and subscribe button somewhere under here, and we'll see you on the next one.
Oh, yes, Moe!